My man is my boss. If he tells me to jump, I'll jump. If he tells me to wash the dishes, I'll go wash the dishes. If he says I can't hang out with my friends, I won't go hang out with my friends.
I like this alter ego, you male chauvinistic pig, you.
This isn't me. This is actually me directly quoting, this lovely woman.
My husband is my boss. My husband is number one. If my husband tells me, hey, sit down, I'll sit down. If he tells me you can't go out with your friends today, I'm not going to go out with my friends. If he says, hey, go wash this dish for me, I'm going to go wash the dish for him.
This is a fascinating one.
This one's really interesting because, I mean, normally it's like, do we even need to talk about this? Do we even need to break this down? I would typically say no, except for the fact that this video has millions and millions of views. I mean, on TikTok, on Instagram, this thing has been shared hundreds of thousands of times, and it's been liked hundreds of thousands of times. So I would guess that just between all the places that have published and republished this thing, it's probably reached 50 to 100 million plus people. And while the majority of them are like, this is really bad and this is not advice, there's a lot of people that are completely on board with it.
No, they agree with it because it follows traditional norms of what a man and a woman should be. Yeah.
So just so everybody can have context for this, why don't we go ahead and play the original video? If you're watching this on YouTube, then, you can also see our reactions to this. And I know what Anthony's going to do already. He's going to zoom in our cockeyed faces because it's going to be, this is really difficult to watch.
Your face is going to show agreement probably.
My face is?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Judgmental, are we? Okay. So let's go ahead and give this a play. Just warning, this can be triggering for some. So just a little bit of a heads up. All right, let's watch it.
My husband is my boss. My husband is number one. If my husband tells me, hey, sit down, I'll sit down. If he tells me you can't go out with your friends today, I'm not going to go out with my friends. Says, hey, go wash this dish for me, I'm going to go wash the dish for him. I chose this man to be the king of my life.
I think I did pretty good on the quotes.
I agree with everything he says, and I do everything he says. And I did that because I chose this man. I put him in this position of my life, and this is how I honor and take care of and love the man in my life. So I tell women out there, you want a man in your life, you want to be happy, figure out what you would do when you are happy. Because I am happy. My husband does so many great things for me. And I would do that for him. I obey him, I respect him, and I let him be the man that he is. I chose a man that I wanted to follow. I chose someone to lead me, and that's why I will do anything for him. If he tells me jump, I'll jump. If he tells me sit down, I'll sit down. If he tells me go in the room or go up on stage, I will do either or. Anyways, that's a message for everyone out there. Love and cherish the king in your life.
Hey, the last line was good. Love and cherish the king in your life. I mean, we should all love and cherish the king and queens in our life.
Yeah, but she didn't say queen. She just said just cherish the king.
True.
And then you were smiling and agreeing and shaking your head for those that are just playing.
Why are you throwing me under the bus today? Like, what did I do to you?
Sorry. It's been a while since we hung out. So
Glenn's got some resentment that's kind of boiling up. You ignored me for the past week. Now, the funny thing about this is like, okay, just all the attention that this thing has received, it has blown my mind. And clearly that was scripted because the other video is a different video and she presents it almost the exact same way. So it looks rehearsed, it looks scripted. And I want to do this. I want to actually go through our initial thoughts first of just like kind of overview. And then why don't we take and break down kind of each line and why it's so dangerous.
Absolutely.
So just initial thoughts. You want to give it to me? What do you got?
I mean, basically what she's saying is that it's the traditional norms of what a man and what a woman should be. You're looking at what, like the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, maybe like early 70s.
Even before that. I mean,
you're just prehistoric caveman type of mentality, whereas the man is the hunter, the leader, the provider. He's this sex machine kind of person, right? Has to go out in the world. Like he's just the aggressive person, whereas the woman is the nurturer, the provider, submissive, obedient, and ultimately, it's going back to the stereotypical roles of what a man and woman should be.
Yeah, like I would say to an extreme extent, right? This is coming from a place where like women aren't supposed to have a voice. Like this is pre-feminist era, I almost feel like, this goes back way further than the 1900s. But either way, it takes on those very specific traditional gender roles of what a man is and what a woman is. And it dismisses all the growth and the progress that we've kind of made on those sides. The other thing too that I think is worth noting is it actually took us a bit of time to figure out where this video originated from. It comes from Marriage is Halal. And this woman, I don't know if it's just this person or if this is she has other people behind this, but it's a business. This woman is operating a relationship coaching and consultation business, and her rates are actually pretty expensive. I mean, it's got me reconsidering some of our rates.
We need to reconsider our pricing at this point, because she's charging $30,000.
She does matchmaking. Can you imagine that? She does matchmaking and she charges $30,000 to match you up with somebody.
She's targeting basically women, saying that she's going to find you the right man for you, but you have to play your role and you need to honor who you are. And then she will find you that man.
Yeah, I mean, if this is what you're looking for, then maybe she is a great fit for that. Please, dear God, don't do this.
Okay.
But I also feel like, so not only is there business motivations behind this, there's religious motivations behind this. Clearly, she's wearing a hijab, and that's why we're talking from the standpoint of like being Muslim. But I'm also saying like this isn't even like a modern Muslim woman's views. My aunt, she lives in Iran and she doesn't hold these views. And she's a devout practicing, Muslim.
Let me ask you this, like in terms of like religion, like the Muslim religion or like Christianity in general, even though there's an evolution, isn't that still the teaching though, that the man is the head of the household, the woman needs to be subservient? Like that kind of identity is still in place. That's how I kind of view it still.
Well, I'm so far removed from Islam that I don't dare speak on that topic. But I will say this. So I don't know what goes on day to day in like the Muslim person's life in terms of like, what do the teachings actually describe, right? I will say this from a Christian point of view. Like I grew up very Christian and I was Mormon. From the time that I was like, when I was, let's say this is 25 years ago, right? I'm 16 years old, something like that. At that time, most of the language was more traditional patriarchal like language, right? The man is the leader of the house, obey, but even then there was quite a bit of discussion about the man's worthiness to lead. And like, it was important that, a woman gives her trust and her to a man who is capable of doing this, not just anybody type thing. So even then there was quite a bit of discussion in terms of like both having roles, but it was heavily sided towards men. Today, it's the language has gotten much more, and I won't say today because I don't still practice. I stopped practicing, like after 20 years. So when I was 35, I stopped practicing. But so when I say today, it's kind of like 5-6 years ago. The language had softened up quite a bit, and there was much more equality in the roles that were being discussed. But it was still it's still a very patriarchal organization. The priesthood is still only for men. Men are the only ones that are allowed to hold the priesthood, that are allowed to preside. So the language has changed quite a bit, but the design of and structure of the entire religion is still
intact. I mean, I have a couple friends that I met up with, and they're very deeply devout Christians. And I mean, they're really cool with their eyes. They're very progressive in many ways, but at the core of it, they're like, my woman serves me and she stays home.
Yeah.
And this is how it is. And this is why it works, because we're honoring what's in the Bible.
Yeah. It's,
and there's no knock against it. And this is the other thing too, like in and of itself, like, traditional norms or genders or religion, I think it's fine as long as it's honored by both people and they truly believe it.
Sure.
And it doesn't go into the space of abuse or toxicity, and you're really honoring something that you believe. I mean, that's fine. Like, it's a personal choice and preference. But in the larger scale, when she's saying this is for everyone and you're saying that this is one thing is the absolute truth, that's when it becomes very, very dangerous.
Yes. And that's why we're devoting an entire episode to this, right? Because at the end, she says, like, I'm sharing this with everybody.
Everyone.
She's putting this out as like actual relationship advice and guidance. And by the way, my experience within Mormonism, I know that is not everybody's experience within different sects of Christianity, but by and large, any form of religion does generally focus on a patriarchal setup for relationship dynamics. This takes it to another extreme. And I'm going to show you how far that extreme goes. Most of the comments on this woman's videos are turned off, very likely because they're probably very negative.
Very heated.
Comments.
Yeah.
Here's another video coming from this person. So not only is she a $30,000 matchmaker, but she also is going to set you up with somebody who, she believes that this is normal.
If I understand that a man craves more than one woman, and I understand that it leads to them stepping out on their marriage, and I understand that Allah's allowed men to have more than one wife,
Allah has allowed
why would
men to
I
have-
stand in my husband's way? Why? For my own selfish
Why would you?
needs? No, he's allowed to marry more than one wife, and I'm not going to be the reason who's like the person that stands in his way and says no.
So this is all coming from someone who also believes that it is okay for basically the man to step out, to have extramarital affairs, to have more than one wife, to... What do you think about her stuff now? Do you maybe agree more? I mean, like,
I've converted.
Have you converted?
I'm totally convinced.
At first you're like, this is dangerous, but now you're
Now I'm
oh.
The more I listen to her, I'm like, the more I agree. No. I mean, no, once again, it's going back to the whole stereotype. Like, men are sex machines, they're hunters, and if they're going out and cheating, then that means that you're not satisfying them enough at home, and you, the woman, are not doing your job.
Yeah. This is not good. So why don't we go and do this? I want to break this down kind of line by line, and let's start from the top. We're going to watch and we're going to pause and just kind of break down the risks and dangers of each piece of this.
My husband is my boss. My husband is number one. If my husband tells me, hey, sit down, I'll sit down. If he tells me you can't go out with your friends today, I'm not going to go out with my friends.
So my husband is my boss. She basically says, like, he is the king, he is this. If he tells me to do this, blah, 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 blah. Well, my first question here is, what if your husband is not worthy of that power?
Agreed. Then what do you do? Does the roles reverse then? Does the woman then become the provider, and then does he have to actually honor her?
No, because in this setup, in this dynamic, it doesn't allow for it. It doesn't allow for it from like a belief standpoint. It doesn't allow for it. That's the first biggest thing that comes to my mind. As soon as I hear this, it's like, okay, maybe if both of you hold to this dynamic and you truly value this, it could potentially work, right, from that standpoint. But what if you end up with somebody who is abusive? What if you end up with someone who's just not a good leader? What if you end up with someone who is manipulative and emotionally just controls you? And this belief gives no room for that.
No, it's true. And then the more aggressive that they are, and then if they're cheating on you and they're doing all these things, the message is going to be, it's your fault.
Yes.
It's your fault. And then you're just feeding the abuse and this cycle that there's something wrong with you, versus I think it's probably the partner that you're with. You're probably in a really bad state and maybe you need to make other decisions.
Well, and later in the video, she goes on to say, like, my husband has done so many great things for me. He does so many things for me. I would do this for him, right? So maybe she has a healthy dynamic and she likes this subservient role and she likes him as the leader. And so she's projecting this onto everybody and saying, like, you know,
and
this is the way to live.
And that's where it's dangerous, because I think she's, for a particular audience that believes in traditional norms, fine, you know, once again, taking away abuse and all these other, components that are toxic, fine. But to say that this is for everyone, that's a very strong statement.
Yeah. Well, that's the other side of it too, right? The next thing that goes through my head is like, man, all the fighting for equality and women's rights and everything is just tossed out the window with this. Like, if you want, according to her perspective, and this is very much the perspective of like those that are deeply religious. They believe that if you want a successful marriage, you cannot be, not even be a feminist. You can't even want equal rights.
Yeah, but this is an example of the larger context that takes place. And then, like things that are on social media, like you have people that are very popular that have like, be a man, and this is what a man is. And you're being too much of a wuss because you're not staying true to who you are. She's just giving the same message, but she's saying, yeah, but on the women's side, you need to be more subservient and you need to honor that role. So it's promoting this message of going backwards to what we should be, versus trying to be something that we're not.
Yeah. You know what I see all of this as is like, there's this, in the past decade, there's been this hyper repression of traditional masculinity, and it's been dubbed toxic masculinity. And most certainly there can be some masculine traits that can be toxic, just like there can be toxic femininity, like it goes both ways, right? But when the voice swings so hard to one side, then you get these counterculture voices that come up. And that's what I believe makes them so popular. This is where the Andrew Tates pop up. This is where the really extreme, like hyper male aggressive voices, and they're like, F that, we're going to be proud of this and we're going to do this. And this falls into that because it kind of supports that same view, right? It's presented from the side of like, well, if you want to be with an Andrew Tate, then you need to be this
like
woman.
her.
You need to be someone that is very subservient. But it all stems from like, whenever a voice swings so hard to one side, it's going to flip back to the other side. And it brings up these extremes on each side.
No, I agree. And that's part of progress. I mean, we did another video about like gender norms and how it's confusing and all the different terminologies. But for me, it's moving. We're progressing and we're redefining what it is to be a man and a woman on both sides. And with that progress, there's an argument that goes back, like you were saying. No, we got to go back to how it was before, so on and so forth. And you have people like her.
Yeah. So then she goes on and she says,
I chose this man to be the king of my life. And yes, I agree with everything he says. And I do everything he says.
If she says jump, I will jump.
Yeah.
If she says go on stage, then I'll go on stage.
What if he's wrong?
Agreed. Then what happens?
What if he makes a bad decision and you aren't there to say, hey, honey, maybe this is not a good idea?
No, but it's still your fault because he told you to do it. You just didn't do it right.
This is so insane. Like the idea that one person can or even should have that much power over your life.
But the other thing too is I'm curious because she says like, he does a lot of things for me. Like what?
I mean, I guess what I would assume that she's referring to is provide, right?
Okay.
He provides. That's the typical role in each of these situations is that the man makes money, that he provides the roof, the home, the food, right? And she stays home. And she stays home.
And she waits for him and she serves him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he gets to go and have his extra marital whatever he wants and all that stuff. I know I know our listeners, the majority of people that are listening to this are just like, this is the dumbest thing in the world. But in reality, this is being seen hundreds of millions of times.
No.
And by many, it is like accepted. And here's the other thing that I want to say about this. When we talk about traditional gender roles, right? It makes sense why those traditional gender roles came about from an evolutionary standpoint, from just a biological standpoint. Look, if it takes 9 months, the gestation cycle for a baby, right? It takes 9 months. Then clearly when a woman, and there's obviously physical differences too, but the gestation cycle by itself makes it so that from an evolutionary standpoint, during that period, a woman is unlikely to be successful hunting or doing things that are going to be very physically intensive when she is, 6 months pregnant, right? So there was a natural division of labor that came about just from that evolutionary standpoint of like, well, this is what it means to provide. It means to go out to hunt, to kill animals, to go and do difficult physical labor. The man is more suited to those tasks. There's physical differences that also make it, whatever it is. And we have the birthing process. All of this changed. The whole feminist process changed, and it began with the invention of birth control. Birth control and the evolution of like what it means to provide now is what allowed this to start changing, right? When providing providing was no longer just going out and hunting and foraging and doing things that were physically demanding and took you away from the home. When providing was going to an office, learning a trade skill, learning a technical skill, creating a business. When that was a means of providing, then it opened up the possibilities for everybody to do it. And when birth control was available, then it created a means for, again, women to have more control and to say, well, this is when I want to have a baby and this is when I don't. And now I can have more control over my career. And so you have this natural progress of like, okay, we're moving in this direction of we live in a society now where equality and the sharing of roles is possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an evolution. Like you're giving like a historical context, right? So you have like prehistoric times, like pre-industrialization, right?
Yes.
And just trying to survive. And the men were gatherers and women were the people that stayed home. Then you had the Industrial Revolution. Then you were working for a wage. The woman stayed home, right? That whole dynamic. But to me, like that encompasses culture and it encompasses societal norms versus more about like the biology. And that's what it comes down to. Like her thing is like biologically women are just this way and biologically men are just this way, right? But when you look at the feminist movement, it actually started, I forgot her name, but she basically went to New Guinea and she was studying tribes and how people lived. And within those tribes, there was one tribe where the men were acting like stereotypical women. They were putting on makeup and they were very giddy and they were giggling, while the women were the hunters and gatherers out there, right? So that came from, it's not a biological thing as much as it is the environment that they were learning from, right? So, I mean, there's biological differences for sure, but just in terms of stereotypical men and women roles, it's more learned than it is anything else.
I agree with you 1000%. And that tribe was a fantastic indicator of like, even with those prior roles, you could role reverse and it could still be completely successful. I'm just saying that the majority of the world was put in this position for survival reasons. And what I'm saying and why I bring it up now is because people like this, this woman who is talking about these traditional roles, they're talking about it as if like the way to success is what we did in the past.
You got to go back.
You got to go back. And what I'm saying is, no, that was a necessity by like what society
survival.
It was a survival thing. Yeah. And it had nothing to do with what was optimal or, would lead to the greatest satisfaction, emotional growth, and all those things. So the call to these traditional roles, it's always this call as if like, what we did in the past was so much better. And no, it's like what we did in the past was forced, it was a necessity of survival. Now it's not forced and you can choose what's optimal.
Absolutely. And then even when people go back to like divorce rates, well, divorce rates were lower in the past. Well, why? Because it was based off of survival components.
Correct.
You needed your partner to survive. One needed to stay home. One needed to work. So there was like, well, I don't like this person, but I need to eat and live. That's why people stayed married more. Where now, like you were saying, there's a quality of life choice. However, as people are progressing and things are evolving, you have people like her, and then you mentioned the Andrew Tates that are saying, actually, quality of life and survival go hand in hand. If you go back to the basics, this is where your happiness and quality of life will be as well.
Yeah, it's so strange the way that they idealize these traditional.
The past.
It's as if like we chose that for happiness reasons. Like, come on, man. Like that wasn't a choice based on like satisfaction and growth and perspective. It was a choice on necessity.
Yeah, agreed. And this is why, we're evolving, right? So that's why, when you have more choices to actually not just survive, but actually figure out what's going to bring you happiness and joy in your life, that is a privilege.
Okay. Then she goes on to say this line.
And I did that because I chose this man.
I did that because I chose this man. And the first thing that came to my mind here is like, well, first of all, many of the people that are in a highly religious environment, they are not making this decision like of their own volition, right? This is either something that's being pushed onto them, or it's heavily influenced by the people around them, like their family members, their aunties, their uncles are trying to basically play matchmaker and put them together with. So I chose this man. I have problems with that because you didn't necessarily choose this person.
Yeah, it's a product of, like you said, your environment, the culture that you're around versus actually deciding for me what's going to make me happy.
Yeah. And at the time when these people are generally getting married, it's usually on the younger side. They're late teens, early 20s. They're getting married young to a point where like, even if you did choose this person, you don't know enough about who you are, what it is that you value. I mean, your developmental years are through your 20s. You don't know enough to know what it is that you are even choosing.
Yeah, so I think what basically she's saying is you need to let go of your independence and reprogram yourself back to what you basically are as a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back to those.
You have to reprogram. And if you do, you'll just naturally be the subservient woman.
Yeah. Which I would imagine like, that's like Matrix moment, red pill, blue pill. Like how do you, once you know something, how do you just go about and forget it? As opposed to like, unless we have the red pill, blue pill, right? Like, okay, yeah, I'll take the blue pill. I want to go back and just forget it all. You can't forget it all. You just live unhappily in this new life. Well,
I think the other thing too is, she's she's giving a very simplistic answer. If If you're miserable, it's because society is it's too chaotic and we're trying to do all these things that we're not. So just go back to being the woman that you are and everything will work itself out.
Yeah. Well, there's another thing here. Even if you did choose this man, even if like, let's say that this was completely your choice, the fact that like, you know, she's so well made up and she's got a ring light and she's got all this stuff tells me that she's living in a first world country and that she has no clue, like traditional Islamic, you know, wedding tradition can often be with someone that you've never met. It can be to someone who is, you have no choice in the matter. But let's just say that you're of this modern era where you do completely have that choice. It's all up to you. Well, this is where we go back to studies from Feeney, right? Studies from Feeney who say that, well, even when it's our choice, and this is so many of our clients, so much of our clinical work is dealing with this. 80% of us are going to choose our romantic relationships based on past wounds, not based on the things that we actually value.
Yeah. So once again, even if you're technically making a choice, you're making a choice based off of unresolved issues of your past. And then saying like, okay, and let's say you pick someone because you had a very traumatic upbringing. Now you're going to honor that person. And let's say this person is very abusive. You're in this cycle of a lot of pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have issues with, I chose this. That whole line in of itself is just not accurate.
And this is how I honor and take care of and love the man in my life.
This is how she honors and takes care of the man in her life. And maybe it can work in her relationship because maybe he operates the same way. Maybe she's told herself that my needs don't matter and all that matters is your needs. I don't know what she's convinced herself of, whether it's an actually healthy dynamic or whether it's completely unhealthy and one-sided and emotionally abusive or physically abusive. Who knows? But that can be a way someone chooses to honor the man in their life. But it assumes that, like saying that this is advice for everybody, assumes that this is the way that you should honor your man.
Yeah, but even further and deeper than that, if you honor your man, you will find yourself by honoring your man.
But this isn't like as a man coming from my perspective, this is the last thing that I would want my wife to do. The last thing that I would want her to do is to do something that she doesn't want to do something that she disagrees with, to go in, like, I'm not going to ever say, go wash the dishes or jump or like, first of all, that straight up sounds like abuse to me. Like for someone to say that and to command that of their partner, that sounds really negative. But the second thing is like, that's not what I value. What I value is a woman as an equal, a person that can stand next to me and help me to make better decisions for our family, who can evaluate, who can be an intellectual, who can stand with me and work to support our family. Like, this is what I value.
So she would probably argue, see, you're listening to too much of societal norms. You're probably having a lot of conflict at home. You need to go back to the norm. You be the provider. She needs to be subservient to you, and you will find more happiness that way.
Yeah. No.
The problem is she's too independent and she's not honoring you enough.
You know, there are other reasons why people cheat. She in her other video talks about how this is just an urge of men and we should let them do their thing. And by the way, men and women, they both cheat. Men cheat a bit more than women do, but they both cheat.
It was like 1%, right?
It wasn't even that much.
Yeah.
It was like, but there are other reasons that people cheat. Of course, everybody has a bit of animal inside of them. Come on, let's be mature. Let's understand that like we're all biologically programmed to procreate, right? We find the opposite sex or we find, you know, whatever, same sex. It doesn't matter what your attraction is. We find people appealing and that's exciting. That's great. But let's get past one major thing. Most of the time when people cheat, it's because of a strange dynamic like this one, where like they're at home, and I'm not going to say most, but I'm going to say, I do want to say most, because it's usually this emotional disconnection between partners where like the person at home is not somebody that they can relate to. They don't feel connected. They don't feel anything. And so one of them steps out on the relationship, right? Well, that is obviously going to happen when you set up a relationship dynamic like this one, because her advice puts you into a parent-child dynamic. It puts you into a dynamic where he's the man and he makes the choices and you're the child and you follow along. Well, you can't feel emotionally connected to somebody in that dynamic. So what are you going to naturally want to do? Go seek that emotional connection with somebody else. Both of you will. So the advice in and of itself literally puts you in the situation where you're more likely to have an affair.
Yeah, it's very paradoxical, right? Because, in truth, she's promoting Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is when you're in an abused relationship, you sacrifice your thoughts and you're trying to think about what the other person wants.
Yes.
You're mind reading. You're constantly trying to figure out getting approval or disapproval based on them. So you're completely self-sacrificing your own health and well-being.
Exactly what this sounds like.
And she's saying if you do that though, however, the chances are your partner will not cheat because you're so in tune and accommodating your man.
Yeah. And if there was anything that I want, I guess our female listeners to understand, when she says,
I obey him, I respect him, and I let him be the man that he is.
I obey him, I respect him, and I let him be the man that he is. I just want to help all of our female audience understand that this is one very specific type of man. There is a very specific type of man that wants a subservient woman as his partner. That is not a representative of like every man. This is not what I want. This is not what you want. This is not what Anthony wants. This is not what most modern men want in their lives. And yet somehow this traditional gender role just keeps carrying on.
Yeah. And once again, I want to preface this, like whatever a person believes, it's fine, but you can't say it's for everybody.
Correct.
Like if she was more, if she was more responsible, she'd be like, this is what we believe. This is part of the religion and culture. This is who we're promoting. We're not promoting abuse, but this is what we believe within this context. That's fine, right? But she's saying this is for everybody. That's a dangerous statement to make.
Yeah. Yeah. Could you imagine being married to a woman that just does everything you want?
I've thought about it.
And
on the bad days, I'm like, oh, it doesn't. But no, overall, I'm just like, no, of course. I'm like, even listening to her voice, remember, like, we're listening to this over and over. I'm like, dude, I'm getting annoyed with her already.
Dude,
it gets annoying. Like, I will, like, please stop.
That sounds exhausting. Like, do I have to make all the decisions? I have to be your dad? Like what is this? I don't want this relationship dynamic at all.
Did you ever watch Coming to America, the first one? And then they're finding the bride for...
Yeah.
And then he's like, bark like a dog. And she's like, row, row, jump on one leg. And she's jumping on one. And he's annoyed, but she's doing it.
Yeah.
Like that's what I was thinking about when I saw this video.
Yeah. Okay. So...
I chose a man that I wanted to follow. I chose someone to lead me.
I choose a man that I wanted to follow. This is the next thing that she says, kind of closing it out. I chose a man that I wanted to follow. I chose someone to lead me. Again, like going back to what you said, if this is what you want, if this is what you value, fine. I mean, I personally take issue with it because like, when I hear something like that, I hear someone that doesn't want to work. I hear someone that doesn't want to like think. They don't want to be their own person. They don't want to. And if that is truly what someone wants, if they don't, then maybe this dynamic would work. But I feel like for most people that might think that at any one point in time, that's a fleeting feeling. That's a feeling that you'll grow out of. That's a feeling that you'll eventually want to be your own person. You'll eventually want to have control over your life.
I mean, let me put it this way. At its best, like this kind of lifestyle, it's fine. Like once again, barring abuse and toxicity, male, female, provider at home, you raise kids, the man works, you have a culture and community that promotes that, and it's somewhat
healthy.
You
can't even bar that. Okay.
But fine, like that, fine, like that's fine. However, you're right. Like once you extend outwardly, there's going to be a lot of conflict because not a lot of things are going to support that.
Yes. And I want to say, like, we say, bar abuse, right? Emotional, physical abuse. You can't, because the dynamic sets you up for it. And when it happens, you just assume, oh, this is just the way that it is.
Exactly. So at its worst, or like moving on the spectrum, once you leave the space and people that are not good people that, that don't believe in this, and you still continue to honor this, you're setting yourself up for a lot of pain.
Yeah. I wouldn't even say like at its worst. I would say the norm is that. And at its best, maybe you have a few examples that go well. The norm is emotional, potential physical abuse. It's, self-sacrifice. It's It's
everything.
the reason why we die young, why we get cancer, because of all these repressed emotions. And I'm going to deny this, and you can choose. I don't know whether she believes this or not. If she's saying it out loud and she doesn't actually believe this dual kind of like, I forgot the word
Paradox.
They're paradoxical thinking, right? Where they're holding like this. They truly don't want this, but they're saying the words out loud as if they're going to convince yourself. Well, this whole process of repressing your emotions, your own needs, your own wants, this is literally what Dr. Gabor talks about in his book, The Body Says No, when all of these things resurface as chronic illness, as autoimmune diseases, as cancers, because the body is still producing hormones and it's still creating based off this thing that is being repressed. And it is going to literally kill us. Like, it's going to shorten your life expectancy. But anyway, I bring this up because I want to say, like, that is the norm. The norm is repressed needs, self-sacrifice, emotional abuse, physical abuse. And then on the extreme side, you take it to whatever degree you want. But that, to me, is the norm of what this dynamic creates. And I saw it throughout Christianity. I saw it in Islam with relatives. I've seen it, and it's so, again, the word is normalized.
I agree. So, I mean, once again, I think she's targeting us. She's trying to make it for everyone, but in truth, it's a smaller circle in terms of people that can honor this. Like, giving her the benefit of the doubt. If she is truly happy, she truly believes what she's saying, and she has a really great life in marriage, fine, but that's a small circle who she's talking to.
Yeah. With that, if you're part of that circle, then,
I wish you well.
Check out the matchmaking services that she offers for $30,000.
$30,000, yeah.
Might work out.
There you go.
There you go. Little plug for her at the end.
We're hooking you up, lady.
Anyway, hope y'all enjoyed the conversation. And if you guys would like an actual scientific, evidence-based approach to relationships, be sure to join the newsletter. You can find it at 12weekrelationships.com. We'll have links for it in the video. You can also find it on our Instagram as well. And this was not nearly as controversial as, what she says and what people like Andrew Tate say. So probably not that many people are going to see it. But for those that did, we hope you enjoyed.
Thank you.